Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Planning and Zoning Commission for May 18th, 2022. Let the record show we are missing one commissioner, Commissioner Troy Bush. I would also like to welcome our newest commissioner representing the county, Mr. Rick Haugen. Rick, welcome aboard. All right, our first order of business here would be actually approving the order of business. Is there any changes or corrections to the order of business, Mr. Hadley?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The only change I have is the city work plan that I handed out to the commission. If you want to look at that, and if you have any questions on it, you can put that at the end of the agenda.
Okay, all right. You want to add that under the work session items? or-
Number 2, if you'd like to have a discussion on it.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no other additions or corrections to the order of business. I'd look for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve order of business.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2, item 2 on our agenda this morning is the minutes of the previous session of April 20th, 22. Any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the previous minutes, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we'll move into our action items on the agenda. First item we were looking at this morning is a special use permit. This is to consider a special use permit SUP-004-22 for the creation of a columbarium on the existing Stevenson Funeral Home site at 2067 First Street West, Dickinson, North Dakota. Mr. Hadley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item was based on an amendment that we just did to our code to allow this. The applicant has done a good job of putting together a plan. In the review of it, I made some suggestions, and I think that there hasn't been any public comment on this or public concern since we advertised it. I believe the applicant has a couple of conditions or changes, proposed changes to the proposed conditions of approval that they'd like to discuss, so maybe we'd start with that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hadley.
Thank you.
Is there a representative from the applicant?
Good morning. Kenzie Robertson with Highlands Engineering, Nick Stevenson with Stevenson Funeral Home. Mr. Hadley gave some of the background on this project. In our application, we are proposing 6 columbaria be located within the Legacy Garden. And each of those would contain 96 urns, which is where, or 96 niches, which is where the urns would be located. We've been working with city staff. I believe we've met all the requirements of this permit. We're working to finalize some of the details on our surety. We've submitted a draft bond and are working to finalize some of the costs for this. We think that the cost to relocate the columbaria, if that were ever necessary, would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000, which would include all the costs to buy the plots from the city cemetery, install foundations, and to move the columbarium themselves. In review of the staff recommendation, we do have one request to waive the requirement to build a low masonry wall on the south side of the property. First of all, there's no requirement for that in the zoning text. And then additionally, that wall would serve essentially no purpose from a privacy standpoint, as the south side of the property is much, much lower than the road surface of the business loop to the south. You'd still have full visual view of the entire columbaria and Legacy Garden. Additionally, the south side of the property is within an existing utility easement. In that easement, there's currently gas, power, and communication lines, which would make building that foundation wall extremely difficult. Instead, as we submitted in our application, we're proposing that we install a tree row on the south side of the property that would provide screening to the Legacy Garden, as well as provide just a more aesthetically pleasing view from the garden. I guess with that, myself and Nick are here to answer any questions you may have on the permit.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Any questions for the applicant, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a
Mr.
clarification. The applicant and I discussed the wall issue. The intent was just to have some definition, and what we discussed after this was published was that plant material that's put in is of a decent size that has some demarcation between the public right-of-way and the columbarium.
Yeah.
And I think that they're agreeable to that, and so that's what's
Yeah.
shown on the plan. And then the only other thing, I thank you for mentioning the bond and the amount. That bond would have to be finalized prior to the time that action is taken by the city commission. So it would be something that we would put in place. So as you gain entitlement, you actually have that in place. So once we agree to the amount and what we're doing, we'll have that as part of what goes forward to the commission. Thank you.
Is the screening was that wall as a screening requirement? Is that what we were thinking? Or?
No, it was more of just a definition of the site. Given the sensitive nature of the site and given the undefined right-of-way there, it just, I feel that we need something, and you know, if they're going to put some more vegetation of size there, that will give us that separation that you feel like you shouldn't just be wandering through there. It's really kind of the idea. If you go by there, it's very open, and there are people that go through there, not on the hour basis, but there are folks that go through there. So it was more for the folks that would be using the facility more so than the public.
You guys have any issue with the tree row or any other concerns with any of the other requirements that are laid out in here?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. What are your wishes, commissioners? Approval motion would include the change from the retaining wall on the south side to landscaping area.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, the easy
Public.
motion would be to just strike condition number 6 and then just follow the plan that they submitted with more mature vegetation.
Okay. And we need to have a public hearing too, so I will do that
Yeah.
now. We will open the public hearing, so anybody in the public or online, I believe at 456-7006, that has any comments or concerns regarding the columbarium application, special use for Stevenson Funeral Home, please come forward, state your name. I think it's up on the TV now. What was it? Anyone online or in the audience that has any comments or concerns, please come forward. Seeing or hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, any further discussion or questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of petition for SUP-004-22 for the Stevenson Funeral Home Columbarium installation, subject to the 8 conditions, striking number 6 listed below or above, and submittal items in attachment A as meeting all the requirements of the City of Dickinson Municipal Code and as also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
We have a motion.
I will second that motion.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. We will move on to item 2. On our agenda this morning, this is a future land use map amendment. This is to consider a flume change to FLM -001 2022 to commercial lots 1, 2, and 3, block 1, lot 1 and tract 1, block 2 of mixed use for lots 5 and tract 1, block 1, and to residential for lot 4, block 1, all in the proposed portions of the district addition preliminary plat. Mr. Hadley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you is a very nicely laid out and prepared mixed-use development. It's just south of Sierra Ridge Apartments along State. And what you have here is you'll have a number of motions, separate motions, the future land use changes that are proposed in here from the existing designations to mostly commercial and then residential for one portion of it, the zone changes that correspond to that, and then the preliminary plat that you have in your packet. This has been advertised as you see it. There are a number of issues that the applicant is working through. Obviously, it's a preliminary plat, so they'll have some time to take care of those issues on the plat prior to coming in for a final plat approval. They are requesting, and I'll let them to go into more detail in that, they are requesting assistance as well from the city on extending infrastructure, upsizing of pipe and extension of water, sewer, and the public roadway through this site. That's something that, you know, they are going to propose in a development agreement that goes forward with the final plat. And with that, I don't know that this particular site was looked at to be developed a number of years ago, and it got to the point where it was approved, but it didn't move forward because there was infrastructure and there were things that were required to do, and the owner at the time did not want to pursue it. So this particular property has seen some requests in the past, and I think this is a good alternative. They can talk about the proposed uses if they'd like on some of these lots. Mostly it's a commercial type development if you look at your information in your packet. And I think they have a request that came late to possibly make it an all commercial development. So I don't know if they'd mix any residential uses in with that commercial use or not, but I think the best thing to do is probably move forward with them and let them present and discuss what they want to do, and then we can move forward with the public hearings. There will be 3 separate motions on this for the future land use, for the zone changes, and the preliminary plat.
Engineering's reviewed this. I mean, access off of States, there's nothing showing here. I would imagine is there gonna be some access other than the streets they're proposing?
No, what's shown on the plat is what they're proposing. Engineering has reviewed it. Like I said, the plat is going to be a work in progress from the preliminary stage that it's at before it gets to the final stage. It comes back before you.
Okay. I guess we can wait till we get to the plat. If the applicant has any questions or any comments, excuse me, they would come forward.
Good morning, Commissioners. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering, representing the applicant Venture Commercial. There are a couple representatives from Venture Commercial here today as well, Aaron Grinsteiner and Chad Glaser. If you have any specific questions for them, they'd be happy to address those as well. With respect to the future land use map amendment, we're requesting this amendment for about a 20-acre piece of property just west of State Avenue, between 15th Street West and 19th Street West. This area is currently designated in the future land use map as commercial, along what would be the extension of 15th Street West to the west of State Avenue, and the remaining portion is designated as residential. The changes we're requesting, we'd like to extend the commercial designation to the north along State Avenue. We would go from about 4.5 acres to around 10.5 acres of commercial property within this site. We'd like the residential to remain on the mid-west central portion of the site in what would be Lot 4, Block 1 of our proposed plat, which will be heard here in a couple items. The change Mr. Hadley referred to would be with respect to this lot. We're not requesting that change today, but the owner is considering a commercial designation for that lot in the future. But for today, we're going to leave that one residential as that's how it was advertised. They're also looking for a mixed-use designation on the north end of the site in what will be Lot 5, Block 1. That would allow for a mixture of residential or commercial uses in that lot. This commercial extension would be consistent with the uses across State Avenue, as it's already developed commercially on the other side of State Avenue, so we feel that that extension is appropriate. The mixed use on the north could either be an extension of this increased commercial area or the residential property. Sierra Ridge apartment complex lies directly north, so it could be an extension of that residential use or the commercial use we're proposing to the south, so we feel that that fits as well. There would be no significant changes in the infrastructure required with this future land use map change. Either way, there are improvements that will be necessary for utilities and access. We are proposing a cost share, as Mr. Hadley referred to, for some of the extension of 15th Street. And maybe that's more appropriate to be discussed in the plat or in our development agreement phase once we get to those places. With that, I would stand for any questions, and again, the owner representatives are here as well if you have any questions for them directly.
Okay, Mr. Shrink, so you're looking for an approval on this, and then you're gonna come back and ask for a change next month?
Correct. So this change just came about here this week. It was already advertised as shown on these materials. As they've looked through their plan here, they weren't sure if residential was the right fit. They may go to more commercial. Since it was already advertised, we talked to staff. We can't really discuss that today because it was advertised as residential. So they would have to come back at another meeting if they're going to change that to commercial.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Do you
Chair,
have any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Mr. Hadley and Andrew, this proposed road here, 15th, is not how it was designed originally. Have you seen the original designs for 15th as an extension? This curves here, and then the original is a straight cut till you get to that saddle where it starts to curve. If it continues to curve through this land as proposed by them, this changes that whole development. Has engineering looked at this?
I believe.
Our
Sir-
engineer.
Sir, I believe Andrew did that plan, and I think part of their proposal is to try to match that plan. But yes, it is different, and the width of the road is a little different too. That's part of their proposal. That from
And
staff's
that was
point-
going to be my second question, the width of the road, because the 15th, if it continues over to 30th, I understand why you want a smaller road, but that road's going to be very busy.
If I may, we do have the master plan that we prepared. I could certainly give you guys some copies of that. It does have a curve on it actually, so if you don't mind, if I
Okay,
could
so that-
approach and pass these.
That's different than Mr. Kubis's original design?
Yeah, we had a master plan, I remember at one time.
Yeah, this is different.
So as shown on our master plan that we had done for the city, I believe it was late 2019, 15th Street did curve. It essentially allows the lots in what is going to be Block 2 on the south side of 15th to have a little more width and depth. Otherwise, they're very narrow, shallow lots that are challenging for commercial development.
Yeah.
And it will kind of weave through the
I do
site,
remember
so-
this now. Yeah, it is different than what Mr. Kubis originally designed. I have that upstairs, the original 15th extension, which was straight and then curved.
Okay. With respect to the right-of-way and the proposed road section, perhaps if we could discuss that further in the plat stage, we can get into our discussion on what we're proposing and why we're proposing the section we are.
And my question, looking at this just quick, again, we have a bunch of little ponds.
Well, in the master plan, yeah.
Yeah, we have a bunch of little ponds. And we all know the issue with these ponds. And this discussion has come up repeatedly about possibly going to regional-type ponds. These things will not be maintained, and they'll eventually become property of the city.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Decker, that is something we discussed in our master plan report that we did with that master plan. There are benefits to regional ponds and there's challenges with regional ponds. This owner, I'm sure, would love to see those ponds go away and become a regional system. The agreements for the city can be challenging. You're gonna have to increase the size of ponds on someone else's property, so how you guys do that, there's not really policies in place at this time to get that done. It is something we talked about with staff. We didn't feel we could get those policies in place to keep this development moving forward in a timely manner. So we did propose to have the ponds on this development. There still may need to be some regional storage because of downstream storm sewer sizing. We've talked with Mr. Schneider, the city's engineering representative, on some issues with stormwater and stormwater management for this area. And there may still need to be some regional detention because of the downstream storm sewer sizing and some things that have happened in this area.
All right, thank you.
With, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm just trying to understand why we want to approve this and then come back and reapprove it next month. I mean, I'm not sure that, what that process is gonna really, it's still gonna be pushed off, and you're not gonna get to city commission until after the next meeting. I'm not sure what the advantage is, so.
Yeah, we're, Mr. Chairman, we are pretty tied to our advertisements and what we advertise versus what moves forward. So staff would agree with the applicant, and that if we could do it, we would. In visiting with Attorney Wenko yesterday, there really isn't any option for us to, we can surely talk about it, you can surely be aware of it, and it surely should be a pretty quick review as it comes back to you when they decide to do it. And it doesn't really stop their development. Their development still can move forward. They're gonna have the future land use zone changes in the plat, and the final plat, as long as the boundary of that doesn't change, they can get full entitlement to this development and come in 6 months and change that zoning, because I don't know that they're ready to build on every lot in this development at this point in time. Given the fact that it's in the middle of the development, I think that it would definitely work for them to come in when they're ready to change it. I would agree, I'd like to deal with it today, but I don't believe we can.
Mr. Chair, I think the reason we would like to continue forward is we'd like to continue forward with the remaining lots. This future land use map amendment's the first step in that process. So if we table the future land use map amendment, the zone change and the plat can't be heard either. So it slows down the entire development. I don't know that they would follow up next month with that commercial designation. It may be down the road a little further than that. They have more immediate plans for some of the remaining lots that they'd like to continue forward with. So that lot is not as pressing as some of the others. So it may not be next month that you see that change, but it may be a little bit more down the road, so.
I mean, if you guys are okay with it, I'm not opposed. I thought if you're gonna come right away next month, it just seems silly to write an ordinance to change it and then write another ordinance to change it.
Yeah, we'd love to do it tonight too, but I understand from staff's perspective, it's gotta be done the proper way as well,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Schrank? Hearing none, we will move on. Thank you, Mr. Schrank. This will require a public hearing, so we will open the public hearing regarding this flume application. Anyone in the public or online at 4567006 have any comments or concerns regarding this future land use map amendment for the area known to be called the district? Anyone in the public or online have any comments or concerns regarding this future land use map amendment? Okay, seeing or hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I move the Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of FLP 0012022 for the 20.85 acres identified in this request, residential, commercial, and mixed use in the northeast quarter of Section 32, Township 140 North, Range 96 West, 5th Prime Meridian, within the boundaries of the proposed district addition, is meeting the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public general health, safety, and welfare.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we will move on to number 3 on our agenda this morning. This is a rezone application. This is to consider a zone change, REZ-005-2022, to community commercial for lots 1, 2, 3, 5, and tract 1, block 1, and lot 1 in tract 1, block 2, and high-density residential R3 for lot 4, block 1, all in the proposed portions of the district addition preliminary plat. Mr. Hadley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, these are the corresponding zones that they're desiring in the, after the future land use changes are done. The staff really doesn't have anything else to add. I think that once the way it's presented right now works, and the future plans, if they change it to commercial, it would work as well. Staff wouldn't have any other comments on this at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Does the applicant have any comments regarding this zoning change?
Thank you. Once again, Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering. Again, this is just a follow-up to the future land use map amendment to change the zoning. We're proposing community commercial on the north, east, and south sides of the development. This community commercial would allow for retail, similar to what you see in the development this applicant just completed, the market edition. Something similar to that may go in here. It could be some shop condos like you see over north of Menards in the Westridge development. Any other miscellaneous retail, office type of businesses could come in here as well. Then we would leave the R3 zoning on that lot 4 in the midwestern portion of this area. And with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schrank. Any questions? Commissioners? Okay, thank you. All right, this will also require a public hearing, so at this time we will open the public hearing. If anybody in the public has any comments or concerns regarding this rezoning request for the district addition preliminary plat, please come to the podium and state your name or call into 456-7006. Once again, any comments or concerns regarding this rezoning request? Seeing and hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Mr. Chairman, I move the Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of REZ-005-2022 for the 20.85 acres identified in this request in the northeast quarter of Section 32, Township 140 North, Range 96 West, 5th PM, within the boundaries of the proposed district addition as meeting the requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public general health, safety, and welfare.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just one clarification. I assume that's just typo. The first request is for 20.85 and all subsequent requests are for 28.85? Are they all 20.85? There should be no difference between the first, second, and third, correct? 20.85. 20.85, okay.
20 point, yeah, sorry.
Any further discussion?
Good catch. It's right above.
Hearing none. All those in favor of this rezoning request signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, we will move on to item 4 on the preliminary plat. This is for PLP 001 2022. This is to create a 1 R3 residential lot and 5 CC commercial lots and 2 stormwater tracts for a total of 6 lots and 2 tracts and 2 blocks within the proposed portions of the district addition preliminary plat. Mr. Hadley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, obviously, the conditions of approval would apply on the preliminary plat. The staff hasn't received any comments, as we said, from any agencies that were against what this proposal shows. They are working with engineering to refine it. The road width was discussed, and I think maybe the applicant's engineer can discuss the traffic capacity, carrying capacity, because that's something that staff and the applicant did discuss in a pre-submittal meeting. I think that engineering staff and planning staff and the applicant both agreed that that 36-foot wide road without parking on the roadway can carry the capacity of traffic going to the west. One of the things that staff brought up was that roadway should not then belly out to a wider profile as it goes west, because that would create some obvious issues for vehicles traveling down there, and all of a sudden you come up on parked cars on the side of the road. So there is some cost savings to not only the developer but also the city. In the long run, it winds up being we have talked for a number of years of creating public roadways that have a little smaller size, but just have the carrying capacity that we still need. And this was part of what this proposal included. It includes 12 conditions of approval. I think the applicant has some comments or possible amendments to some of them, or at least comments on some of the conditions of approval. So with that, I'd turn it over to the applicant to come up and talk about the preliminary plat.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Mr. Schrank.
Thank you. Andrew Schrank, Highlands Engineering. As Mr. Hadley indicated, this is the plat for the application that we've been discussing. We are proposing 5 commercial lots, 1 residential lot, and then 2 tracts on this plat for stormwater management. We are dedicating right-of-way for the south half of 19th Street. The north half was dedicated by the development to the north, and a little over half of that road is actually already constructed. And then we are dedicating the right-of-way for the continuation of 15th Street West as well. All lots within the development would gain access from these 2 right-of-ways or State Avenue. To clarify, we would have approaches off of State Avenue. Staff has asked for some non-access lines at the corner of 15th Street and State Avenue, so that we don't have any approaches too close to that intersection that can create traffic issues. But we would have potentially up to 3 approaches, attempting to line those up with the approaches across the street. There are 2 on the east side of State Avenue. If possible, we would line those up with those approaches. Otherwise, we'd offset them with sufficient distance. We've got some water and sanitary sewer easements provided through development to extend water and sewer mains through this site to serve this development. We're proposing that the developer would construct these mains, but ultimately they'd be maintained by the city, and that'll come in our subsequent development agreement. That would be similar to what was done for the Market Edition recently. And we also have some drainage easements proposed to convey the stormwater runoff to the tracks for stormwater management in the northeast and southeast corners of the property. As was indicated previously, we are requesting a reduced right-of-way as well as a reduced road section for 15th Street West. The section we're proposing would actually have 2 12-foot driving lanes and a center 2-way left turn lane that would be 12 feet wide as well. The city's comprehensive plan calls for a 48-foot wide street section for collector roadways. That street section is a 12-foot shared parking and pedestrian or bike path lane and 2 12-foot driving lanes. With our section, What we'd like to do is a shared use path on the north side of this corridor to allow those bikes to get off the roadway and give them a designated place that's safer for the pedestrians. As far as capacity goes, there's no change in capacity with the section that we're proposing. In fact, it would be a slightly greater capacity with the designated left turn lane, allowing vehicles to have a place to decelerate and make left turns along this area. The change would be on-street parking. We're proposing to eliminate the on-street parking. Through this development, we're proposing commercial. Commercial per your code is required to provide their own off-street parking, so we don't foresee on-street parking being necessary through this development. And again, I'll refer you guys to the master plan that we handed out. If you look at the extension of 15th Street West as it goes west through the neighboring property, the residential lots that are proposed there back onto 15th Street West. There is very limited frontage on 15th Street West. Therefore, the parking would not be necessary. This would be similar to what you guys have along Museum Drive or 12th Street, 21st Street. You don't have any residential lots fronting these roads, so there isn't that need for the on-street parking. Another reason, if you look, there is an area designated at the 15th Street intersection. There's a collector that goes north, kind of in the center of that map, for a future elementary school. We did meet with Marcus Luton, the Dickinson Public Schools, a few months back and talked to him about that site, if they are still considering that. They said that is still an option for them. He did meet with city staff to talk about the potential for continuing these roads and the cost of these roads. But if that is the potential school, getting this the parking off these streets, opening up the visibility will make this a safer corridor. You won't have kids coming out behind vehicles. Giving that shared use path gives them a safer place off the road to ride bikes. There's the destination park that we show at the top of this hill, the big kind of green area at the top with the trees. Gives that the shared use path would get those bikes going up to that park off the road on a shared use path. So we feel it provides a safer, more economical roadway. There's less pavement for this developer to build. There's less pavement for the city to maintain. There's actually less right-of-way, so you guys obtain more taxable property. So all in all, we feel it makes sense for this area. The other thing we're proposing, and again, I don't know if it's necessarily tonight, but we do have a development agreement that we've submitted for a cost share on the 15th Street West improvements. If you look, these are improvements that are going to serve a larger area. This isn't just serving this development. 15th Street West will be the first through road north of Interstate. It is designated as a collector. It's necessary for the community, not just this development. It benefits the development, yes, so that's why we're proposing a 50-50 cost share in that development agreement. And that would not just be for the road, we're also proposing that for the storm sewer, the sanitary sewer as well. Again, those would serve future development to the west. They're not just needed for this development, they're needed for all the development in this area. So we feel the cost share there is appropriate. We did get city staff comments. We do have a few items we'd like to discuss in those comments, largely related to our development agreement that staff did not have at the time this was put together. We just finished that up and sent it out. And we're hoping, just for your information, to present that at the June 7th City Commission meeting for Commission's consideration of the cost share and some of the terms in that agreement. Number 2 on the staff report indicates the extension of 15th Street West will have a 50-50 cost share on upsizing of sewer and water services. We are proposing a cost share, but it's for the roadway, the sanitary sewer, the water, all those, and I'm sorry, not the water. The water will be fully paid for by the developer. It's the roadway, sanitary sewer, and storm sewer that we're proposing the cost share on. And it's 50-50 of the full construction cost of those items. Number 5, the applicant shall construct all utilities in the expansion of the right-of-way for 19th Street West through their development. Again, there's an item that came up through our stormwater analysis where We need to reconstruct a portion of this roadway due to some stormwater issues. We're proposing that cost be bore by the city. And again, we can maybe get more into that when we actually talk about the development agreement, but that would be the only caveat to number 5. The applicant on number 7 shall construct and maintain the proposed stormwater management tracks. In our development agreement, we're proposing that those tracks be turned over to the city after construction. What we've seen with a lot of these that have HOAs, essentially they don't pay their taxes on those tracks, they don't maintain them, the city comes in and maintains it and essentially pays that cost anyways. The HOAs haven't been working for the city, so we're just proposing to turn those over to the city once they're built and approved. Number 8, the applicant shall be responsible for all public street lighting, signage, striping on all roadways. Again, we're proposing the cost share for 15th Street on those items. Number 10, the applicant shall be responsible for traffic safety issues that may be required by public safety or engineering for the intersection of 15th Street West and State Avenue. We're not necessarily opposed to that but we would like to know what those issues are, if there are concerns with the safety, and if there's concerns that are related to this development or if they're existing concerns. If they're existing concerns, we feel that should be the city's responsibility to address those issues. If there's something specific to this development, I guess we'd like to be made aware of what that is, because that could become a significant cost if it comes up at a later date. Number 11, the applicant shall provide a pedestrian crossing plan for 19th Street West for those on the south side of the street. We did provide staff the crosswalk guidelines that is published by the North Dakota DOT. For one lot in this case, it wouldn't warrant a marked crosswalk. There are criteria on when you mark crosswalks and when you don't. And in this case, we don't feel the criteria met to mark that crosswalk. So I do feel it is sufficient to provide one across State Avenue to this development, but providing a crosswalk across 19th Street is likely not warranted. And with that, I would open it up for any questions you may have.
Mr. Hadley,
Mr. Frank, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Kersey.
looking at 15th Street West, going back to that a while ago, to the east of there, 15th Street West is already quite busy, and now it's going to be a through street. There's some proposals on changing it. Is it going to be narrower to the west than it is on the east side? Will there be some sort of traffic control device on 15th and State there, or?
It is narrower, Commissioner, going to the west, or what's proposed to go to the west. Right now, it's been deemed, I believe, through our engineering department and the applicant, that it's not warranted for like a streetlight type control. That's one of the questions. That's why I brought that up in the control of that intersection does at times have issues. I personally don't know what the answer is for
It has
that.
issues at times now, but when this becomes a
Right.
through street, I think 15th is going to be quite busy coming through that subdivision, going into the commercial, that's going to be to the west of there, and the Menards area and stuff like that.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Karski, I can address some of the signal concerns. State Avenue is an urban road, so it can receive North Dakota DOT funding for improvements. With the DOT involved, they will not allow a signal to be installed until warrants are met. We've dealt with this on other roads in the city where projections even show a signal may be warranted in the near future, but until that criteria is met, they will not provide any funding or allow for signals to be installed on intersections. I believe the city did a study not too far in the past on State Avenue, if I'm not mistaken, and it didn't warrant signals at that time. And that's something, again, we don't feel should be borne by this applicant. This applicant has 3 lots adjoining 15th Street West. Those would not be the reason for warranting a signal. It would be the traffic that's already on 15th, already on State Avenue, that may come from the west, from the interstate exit. So Again, we don't feel that should be the applicant's responsibility. when
Right,
those
I
warrants
wasn't
are met.
suggesting the signal was a responsibility of yours. I was just wondering if we're planning for it in the future. The width of the road was more of my concern, is that as 15th does go west, and I think it will be quite busy, are we going to hurt ourselves by not allowing this to be too narrow, or will it be able to support the traffic, the future traffic in that area?
Commissioner Karski, I think that the applicant's engineer did verify that a 36-foot wide road with no parking and a turn lane will probably carry, and it's very similar to what we have on some of our roadways that we've done kind of a road diet on, to where we've taken some of the parking and taken some of the width and taken some of the lanes, and then had just traffic moving at a quicker pace. I don't think there's as many obstacles. So I think what they're proposing, and this is something that we had discussed many years ago when Mr. Kubis was here. We actually talked about lessening the width of a lot of our roadways and doing this not only for a cost savings for city maintenance, but also it still moves the same amount of traffic. And I'm sure Andrew can provide and give you much better data than I can on that. But I think that it will move the traffic that we need it to move. We just need to be consistent as we move to the west and keep that same roadway.
Are we gonna have right of way for any right turn lanes?
Mr. Chair, we would not have a right turn lane. We need to match what's on the east side of 15th Street, which currently right now is 3 lanes. So we need to make sure we match up with what's shown on the east side of 15th Street.
I'm just asking because at the corner of State and 21st,
Yep.
if it starts racking up there, and there's obviously no right turn lane there now,
Yep.
it's not a good situation. Same with.
I don't know that it's out of the question. We could even look at options to widen the right-of-way for a future turn lane or something along near the intersection of State Avenue and 15th Street. If that is a concern, I don't think that would be a major deal. It would just eat into what is shown as Tract 1.
I mean, I think we're obviously limited on the east side because there's already something there, but, I mean, for future, I mean, that's something we need to consider because.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Karski, I think, after listening to Mr. Schrank's explanation on the width of the road and everything, I think that would be appropriate, just especially when it comes to snow removal, not having on-street parking there, for city staff to clear that lane, especially as we've seen 21st, how it blows in and essentially shuts down. Being no on-street parking, that would greatly help city staff to clean that road if it's built to what they're requesting. And I agree on the 15th Street on the signal, that's an ongoing battle that we have to deal with on the state level. I don't think it's really their battle to fight. I mean, it is the city's battle, but I think we'll have to continue to look at that and how much traffic's increased because of this development and future development. But we're gonna have to battle with DOT just for signal lights. We've been asking for signal lights throughout the city at certain areas, and anything that DOT controls, it always comes down to a warrant. Some of those concerns with how wide this road is, I think it would be appropriate for this section, especially when it comes to snow removal and moving traffic.
Mr. Chair, if I could just address some of the capacity concerns that were brought up as well. The section we're proposing does not reduce any traffic carrying capacity on this road. Your comprehensive plan has 2 driving lanes. We still have 2 driving lanes. We're not reducing the carrying capacity. We're simply eliminating off-street parking. One thing that we're adding that's going to help the flow of this road is the center 2-way left turn lane. That's not shown on your current comprehensive plan collector roadway. So that gives you an area to pull off the road for left turns. It keeps traffic flowing. There's been a couple of these added that I think have been very successful for much higher volume roads. Villard Street just went to a center 2-way left turn lane, State Avenue, and I think they've been very successful in my opinion. What we're eliminating is the on-street parking, And again, we feel that actually increases the flow of the road. You don't have the obstructions on the side of the road. You don't have the visual impairment. It keeps this road open, flowing, and functioning like we foresee it functioning.
I have a question. So following up on the snow removal and those kind of things, emergency use on 15th, because currently on the east side there, that's 48 feet, is that correct? 15th? And then the proposed is reducing it down to 36 feet?
Yeah, 36.
Okay. So does that limit, like, for snow removal and for law enforcement, if they need to pull someone over? I work over on the, just close to there, and that is a very dangerous corner at 8 o'clock in the morning, at noon, at 3 o'clock, and at 5 o'clock. There was just a major accident there 3 weeks ago that shut the whole area down. So that is one concern I have. So,
And I think, Commissioner, I think that's a good point, and that's why I put that very open-ended condition in there, because I think that there are some issues that we all know that exist, and then is there something this development can do within means to not make it worse? And then the long-term issue is, obviously, like the mayor said, the city is going to have some responsibility and buy-in to future improvements there. So I think it's kind of a collaborative effort, but I think if there is something that the applicant can do to lessen the existing issues there, and because there are times when it's not the best intersection to go through, and we are adding people. Whenever you add more people to it, besides the walkers that walk to the water tank, that's the only folks that are there now. It will make a change in that particular intersection. I'm not an expert in that, and that's why I put that condition in that, so that our engineering staff, the applicant, and you folks can voice your issues and concerns. The good thing is it's a preliminary plat. So, by the time it comes back to the final plat, there might be some other issues, and there might be some more dialogue that we can have to come up with some ideas that might soften this. So, it is a good point. That's why I brought it up.
Mr. Chair, if I could just address a couple of those comments. With respect to the snow removal concerns, the section that we're proposing still has an 11.5-foot wide boulevard on the south and a 6.5-foot wide boulevard between the road and the shared use path. So that gives you plenty of room to push and pile that snow in those boulevards adjacent to the road. So even though you don't have that parking lane there, you've got plenty of boulevard within that 66-foot right-of-way. As far as safety on the intersection, one thing we can do and will do is add those non-access lines at the intersection of State and 15th. That would keep any approaches from becoming too close to this intersection. If it ever becomes signalized in the future, you've got turn lanes and stacking depth for the 15th Street and State Avenue intersection that is sufficient. Access control is always a big part of safety near these intersections, and I think we can accommodate that on this plat.
I'm not opposed to the plat. What I'm concerned with is that you're gonna be looking for the city commission to make an approval next month on all these cost shares, which are all major policy changes from what we're currently doing. I'm not sure that that's gonna be possible. These are major policy changes. We're changing our policy on the right-of-way width, we're changing our policy on cost sharing of collector roads and that's a lot of stuff to discuss in 30 days. Plus, we don't even have any idea what it's gonna cost yet.
Mr. Chair, we do have a cost. Currently, the development agreement, we're capping the city's cost share at $500,000. Again, we'll present more information on the benefits of this development, how it's going to serve the city, some of the revenues the city might see. When we present that to the city commission, the owner's representative will present some information that might help soften your concerns with the cost to the city. It is a lot, I agree. We are asking for some major policy changes here. This is something we've been pushing with city staff for a while. Development doesn't get any cheaper. I got to be honest, it's really hard right now with infrastructure costs to make development work in this city. These collector roads like this serve a larger portion of the city than this development. Collectors are vital to the traffic flow for the entire city, not just this development. The local roads, we can understand, those are serving that development. They don't provide the flow that the traffic needs for safety and moving people and vehicles through the city. The infrastructure that's going into 15th Street, again, we have 3 lots on that road. Quite honestly, we have to upsize our storm sewer for future development to the west. We have to upsize our sanitary sewer for future development to the west. It doesn't make sense for 3 lots to put that amount of infrastructure in place. I agree, it's a big policy change, but I think it's something that to keep development moving forward, the city needs to have some hard discussions on and really strongly consider, at least for these larger, higher density roadways, as well as upsizing of utilities and how we handle that, because quite honestly, it limits a lot of development right now in the city.
Mr. Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, the cost sharing really has nothing to do with our decision today, does it? Or
No.
that would be future
I mean,
commission?
that wouldn't be a city commission issue when we go to approve the final plat, so. I mean, it's just, like I said, we can approve this. I mean, you obviously are not looking to record any of this, obviously, until we.
Correct, and we are, again, we've asked staff to kind of push some of their policies as well. You know, it's not typical that you hear a development agreement before a final plat, but that cost share is essential to moving this development forward. So we've asked staff to make some exceptions there, get us on the agenda a little bit sooner, because we need to know how the city feels about that cost share before this developer gets too deep into this and can't turn back. So we are pushing a lot of policies here, we understand that, but I think this is a great development. This is a great applicant here. They've done some successful commercial development very recently, and I think this is something the city could be proud of if this moves forward.
That, I didn't see that development agreement in our packet, but. Was it supposed to be in our packet? The development agreement?
I'm not sure if it came in time to.
Mr. Chair, I think it was submitted later. We just finished that up a week or 2 ago, so it probably didn't make it into your packets.
We can definitely drop it in.
President Decker, I mean, you got any comments? I mean, these are gonna have to be discussions held soon with, right?
I think this is best held with, proceed with what's here for you as a planning and zoning board, and then these discussions are gonna have to happen with the city commission. We also, I mean, my question is, this is something we're gonna have to sit down with the school district also. And they own the majority of that land, that 100+ acres to the west. How they want to proceed. We're gonna have to work with them, and then the larger question too is all the land to the farthest west is owned by NDSU. And have they even been contacted to start discussions on, you know, this process? We've pushed before, Mr. Chairman, to complete 15th. We've talked about the necessity of that road being in there, and just, so we're gonna have to have that discussion as a commission, especially at budget season, to address this development. I do see it as a needed project, but that whole quarter of land needs to be discussed, not just the district. So, but I think something like this could move it forward on a little bit quicker pace,
Agreed.
so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioners? Right, thank you, Mr. Schrank.
Thank you.
At this time, we will open the public hearing regarding this preliminary plat application. Anyone in the public or online at 456-7006 have any comments or concerns regarding this preliminary plat? Please step forward or call in. Once again, anybody in the public or online at 456-7006 have any comments or concerns regarding this preliminary plat application? Seeing and hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Mr. Chair, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of PLP 001-2022, the preliminary plat for the district addition as depicted in attachment A for 6 lots and 2 tracts total, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare, with the proposed 12 conditions of approval and no additional requirements.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I could have clarification on that. I think we wanted to add, I think the applicant wanted to add no access lines correctly. They offered to do that, so that would be condition number 13, and then maybe Mr. Karski, if you wouldn't mind,
Does that have to-
acknowledging those changes.
Does that have
they-
to be, does that have to be a condition? Can't they just put that on their preliminary, final plat?
They can, but I think they acknowledged it, but,
Is that-
but then acknowledging the changes that they had talked about in the conditions as well.
Amendment to that motion, the
Thank you.
13th condition, no access lines, is that correct?
Yeah, no access lines along 15th and those first, close to the intersection.
No access lines along 15th and close to the intersection as discussed.
Mr. Franchuk, do you? That amendment? All right. Any further comments or concerns? Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. You're everyone. We'll move on to item 5 on our order of business this morning. This is a Chapter 39 text amendment, an ordinance amending and reenacting sections 39.02.006, 39.02.011, and 39.02.019 relating to the definitions of personal heavy and commercial vehicles, and section 39.09.008 of the City Code of the City of Dickinson, North Dakota relating to the parking for personal and recreational vehicles. Mr. Dukart looks like is gonna.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I have a few photographs I'd like to give you before I start.
Ms. Wanko, do you wanna, are you the one giving us the
Yes,
overview?
I can give you the overview as Mr. Dukart does his thing. If you all recall, we had an opportunity to discuss this last meeting and the meeting prior. There were some concerns about some of the language with regard to what a permitting process needed to be. And so I believe after the last meeting, Mr. Dukart and Mr. Schwint did meet with Mr. Chairman Frederick and I believe Commissioner Bush and sat down and went through some additional revisions. And so the current version that you have in there addresses some of those concerns with regard to when a permit would be required and whatnot. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Dukart so he can shed some light on those initial comments. And then also too, There are some changes and amendments there. We did add some additional definitions for clarity. I do think that's important that we're defining our terms. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Dukart.
Okay, the main purpose for these text amendments is to clarify the parking of certain vehicles in residential zones and exactly how they will be allowed to park, as in parking pads, et cetera. And the reason for that, obviously, is to help our department perform our jobs more efficiently if we clarify these particular parking areas. The photos you're looking at is, there are a few larger recreational vehicles and regular recreational vehicles parked in right-of-ways and vision triangles. Those are main concerns, and if we don't clarify where they're allowed to park, we are repetitively addressing these same issues, and people are moving them, and then they're moving them back out. There is a section in the code, in section 23, that does allow recreational vehicles parked from April 1st until November 1st in the right-of-ways, but we're addressing the parking on private properties, not just right-of-ways. And the private property and the zoned areas are the main issues that we're having.
It's gonna be one of my questions, so we have a policy that says from those dates we can park in the right of ways, so if they're in their driveway and hanging over the sidewalk in the right of way, does our other policy contradict what we're trying to do here?
I think it's a matter of interpreting both policies together. Again, as Mr. Dukart indicated, this is a policy that would be limited or directed to private property and making sure that that makes sense and it's conducive to what we're requesting. And of course, enforcement issues are always a concern for the building department. So I think we adopted that policy a couple years ago with regard to recreational vehicles to make it easier for citizens to have campers and large vehicles. So again, I guess my designation or my distinction would be the fact that we're dealing with two separate private versus, right-of-way parking. Can there be some interpretation in that? I suppose. I think the process of this whole process and this amendment is to make it easier for their department in using maybe some discretion in determining what's going to be allowable and what's not going to be allowable.
Where I'm seeing where the contradiction is gonna come in is, you take this picture right here. He's not over the sidewalk, but he's obviously in the right of way. So he's not impairing the use of the sidewalk, but he's in the right of way. And then our other policy says that from these dates, we can park in the right of way. So is this better or worse than him keeping it on the street where our other policy says it's okay, or is this one okay?
I'll let Mr. Schwint answer that one.
Mr. Chairman, Board, the intent of the policy to allow parking in the right-of-way is street parking. That was the intent, not on the boulevard, not over a public sidewalk. That is also right-of-way, but that intent was for on-street parking, which is right-of-way.
So, on-street parking is better than this?
Per our code, if you're actually blocking a public sidewalk,
Well, the sidewalk's not blocked, that's what I'm saying.
and again, on issues like this, unless it presents a hazard, which if somebody's actually backing out of their driveway next to that, and you have a child on a bike, they're actually blocking that view from that public sidewalk. So you could, it's all about safety, so.
I understand that, and I'm not trying to be hard here, but if this motorhome is parked on the street right by their driveway, isn't that gonna block their view backing out of their driveways all?
Absolutely, and that would be a police department. If there was a complaint or an accident in that area, again, it's at the discretion of city staff. If you're presenting a hazard, it's our job to try to remedy that.
Well, and I understand that. That's where I'm getting, one policy says it's okay to park in the right of way, and then we're gonna have an ordinance that says it's not okay to park in the right of way.
And I think I would piggyback on Mr. Schwint's comments here that the thought with the right-of-way is on-street parking. I don't think when that was adopted that the thought with city staff was to be allowing them to park in boulevards or in sidewalks or things of that nature. I don't believe that that was the intent when that policy was adopted.
Prior to the adoption of that policy, we had year-round storage of campers and boats on city streets. The development of that policy or that ordinance was to eliminate that. And I believe the concession of the commission at the time is to allow, based on that timeline per our ordinance, so people can actually park their boats and campers on the street to, because we also have that 48-hour. That ordinance allows them to keep those vehicles on the street without being ticketed. Prior to that ordinance, I can't put the number of complaints that we had or hazards that people were, as far as even clearing snow.
Yeah, I understand why it was put. So is that an ordinance or is that a policy?
That's actually an ordinance, I believe.
That was created and adopted in code, and a lot of it had to do with the snow removal issue as well, and that's why there's the time limit between those months in the amendment, because obviously it's nearly impossible to clear snow when you've got large campers on streets. So we allow for it during the summer months because that's what people need, but during the winter months, they need to be cleared and off right away.
Is section 23.56.290.
So what I'm asking is by adopting this ordinance, do we need to look at that one? So
I can certainly go ahead and review that and determine whether or not we need to make any additional amendments to that. That is in chapter, I think, 23, so it's not
Yes.
something that would need to come back in front of this board, but it's certainly something that I can look at to see if we need to bring something in front of the city commission for an amendment.
thank you. Sure. Well, yeah, maybe just give us a little back history on how right-of-ways in some areas work, so. Do you want to do that, or?
Depending on your questions, right-of-ways, the
Well, let's
use
say in
of.
residential areas.
In
They got
residential.
Curbside sidewalk compared to boulevard sidewalk
Okay,
typically.
so generally, when you look at your property line on Boulevard, your property line is on the inside or house side. That would be your property line. Curb sidewalk is generally about 14 feet back. If you have curbside, you tend to park things in your driveway and get as close to that sidewalk as possible. So you actually could be in the right of way. We don't go around driving looking for these items. It's usually a hazard, or it's a neighbor complaint, or somebody hit their head on the fifth wheel. That's actually calls that we have gotten. Those are the complaints that we address. We're not driving around looking for these type of circumstances. The adjustment of this ordinance also is that we have people filling their front yard with scoria and then parking campers, trailers, and taking up the whole front yard. That is for clarity, so we can do our jobs more efficiency. Part of the city Dickinson ordinances are aesthetics throughout our city also.
So, Mr. Schwint, in this photo, the right-of-way is actually not to the sidewalk?
Correct.
How far inside of the sidewalk does it go?
In some cases, it could be, generally, if you measure from the front of your house in this particular neighborhood, 25 feet
From the front of the house?
from the front of the house, that will get you close to your property line, because that's a standard setback for residential lots.
Typically from the back of the curb, it's 10 to
14.
10 to 14 feet
Yeah.
usually, is where so wherever your property line would start, which is probably like right here.
So they could be 6 feet into the right-of-way.
Yeah, that's,
And generally, on that photo in particular, it might be something that's actually broken down, unlicensed, and it hampers the neighbor's view to back out of their driveway. That would be something we would address.
so in the newer neighborhoods that have boulevard sidewalks, the right of way is the back of the sidewalk
Okay.
usually. And that's where your property line usually starts too, so. Okay. And then, the only other question I had is heavy recreational vehicles being prohibited. Thoughts on that? If we're gonna allow somebody's 45-foot fifth wheel to sit in their driveway, but we're not gonna allow their 45-foot motorhome to sit in the driveway? Is that what we're trying to get at here?
And again, it was for definition purposes. Again, you have, I guess we enforce ordinances for the lack of better, people that are the extreme of noncompliance. That's what we're looking for. As far as the definition of heavy, prohibiting them, that might be a little strong. But that's, even the storage of heavy commercial vehicles, that's actually, shouldn't be in a residential neighborhood at all. But people are getting these larger coach RVs and longer fifth wheels. If we're gonna allow it, I guess I'm open to, as far as if we need to take the heavy part off as a coach, but it's always at a discretion, where when it's at our discretion, there's always room for argument. We're interpreting of what we see, and again, it's a hazard, or a lot of these are complaint driven. It really, if it's a hazard to the environment or neighboring properties, that's when we address them.
So may I ask, like, for this picture right here, is it because they're in the right of way, or is it just because it's on a stop surface next to the garage?
We actually went around and took pictures of the things that we address. A lot of times that one may be unoperable, unlicensed, and to piggyback on top, that would be in the right of way. And it could be, I mean, a number of things, even the vision clearance triangle for the neighboring property. We have ordinances for fences also, that a lot of these coach motorhomes are definitely taller than what our 4-foot fence is in the front yard, or 32 inches next to a driveway. So if our ordinance says you only can have a 32-inch height fence, but we're allowing a 16, 18-foot motor coach to actually be right out to that property line or in the right of way, we're actually allowing a higher hazard than we would a taller fence.
And again, the majority of the policing of this policy, will be derived from complaints. Is that
Or a hazard.
I don't like the heavy recreational vehicle part of it, but,
We're not opposed to actually removing that.
I mean, I understand tractor trailers and stuff like that, but I just don't think we can tell somebody.
And I think part of that came in as far as probably, we had I believe a citizen believe that their semi was their ride. So I think that's where a lot of the clarification, where we included heavy commercial vehicles.
Well, I mean, if it's used for commercial use, I mean, to pull a trailer that's got like livestock in it, I mean, I think that's a little different than a motorhome, but.
I agree.
And then enforcement, I mean, nothing talks about enforcement, so how does enforcement work here so if it's in the right of way and if it's on the street, I mean, how's the enforcement work with your department?
Generally, the complaint would come into our department. If it's on the street, we forward it to the police department. We actually just had some dialogue with the police department actually this week to clarify the procedure and that process. So we work well with the police department as how it's addressed. If it's in the right-of-way, say, for instance, on the boulevard, we'd notify police, or even on private property. Our code mandates that PD would tag a vehicle in violation and then follow up. The PD would follow up after the vehicle is tagged by the police department. But on private property, we send a letter out. If the property does not comply, then we send it on to the police department. We don't notify the police department right away. We try to meet property compliance prior to going to that next step.
What's the remedies? I mean, do we have a fine structure on this, or?
Mr. Chairman, yes. So this is all set by Chapter 39, and Chapter 39 in itself has various violation penalties. That's a lot of those changes that we're making with regard to certain things. So a lot of those can end the violator in municipal court facing fines and fees for noncompliance.
Okay. All right. I mean, other than the heavy recreational vehicles, I don't have any other issues with this, I guess, unless you guys have any comments on it, but. Not hearing any, so. All right. Mr. Hadley, you have any other comments regarding this?
I don't, Mr. Chairman. I do agree that it needs to be addressed. It is a problem for buildings and codes to enforce, and it's
Okay.
been that way for a long time.
All right, thank you. Did we table this last time?
We did, sir.
Okay, so we need to have a public hearing then?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, guys. We will open the public hearing regarding this Chapter 39 text amendment. If anybody in the audience or online has any comments or concerns regarding this Chapter 39 amendment, please come forward or call into 456-7006. Anyone online or in the audience, come forward. Seeing or hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the Chapter 39 text amendment ordinance as written, with the exception of heavy recreational vehicles, as mentioned.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We will move on to item 6 this morning, and this is our Renaissance Zone Development Amendment. This is to consider an expansion of the City of Dickinson Renaissance Zone by 2 blocks. For properties that proposed with the inclusion are legally described as Prairie Hills Mall First Edition, Prairie Hills Third Subdivision, and Prairie Hills Walmart Subdivision, City of Dickinson, North Dakota. Mr. Hadley, or Mr. Josephson, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Friedrich, Commissioners, and Steve Josephson. As we had a presentation at the previous meeting. I know we have a new commissioner here. The Renaissance Zone program is a program that the state created that allows cities in North Dakota to encourage redevelopment in blighted and distressed areas. In distressed areas, the city of Dickinson has participated in that program for a number of years. The number of blocks you have is based upon census population. Because the census population for 2020 went up to 25,000, the city under the Century Code is allowed to add two more blocks in. The blocks that staff has recommended adding in are the block where Prairie Hills Mall is located, and also the block immediate to the north of that. So that does require approval by a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and approval from the City Commission, as well as from the Department of Commerce. We have been in touch with Department of Commerce staff, and they are supportive of this addition. What you have before you that would go up to the state is, besides the staff report, is a revised inventory, a revised map, and then a number of properties that were identified as places for potential projects. Staff has been in touch with the manager at Prairie Hills Mall, who said there's a couple of projects that they're looking at that could be aided through a program like this. And on the block to the north, there's a vacant building there that I believe Mr. Hadley has been in touch with for redevelopment. Staff recommends approval. Let me just add, this is a non-contiguous block. The Century Code does allow does allow up to 3 blocks that aren't an island that aren't attached. In this case, it's 2. Staff recommends approval, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Commissioners, have any questions regarding the additional blocks being added?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add a couple things. Stephen, thanks for
Mr. Alley?
presenting that. The mall, just so everybody's aware, as Stephen said, there was a couple projects there. The state is on board with the individual stores in the mall that are vacant. They can become individual projects as well. So that is actually an interesting thing that might help redevelopment of the mall. And then Stephen did mention there is a economic development type project that is now in some sort of a final form that's going to move forward and come to the city commission in the old Family Fair building. So,
All right, thank you,
Mr. Hadley,
Thank
I'm
you.
not sure how individual stores in the mall could take advantage of the Renaissance Zone. Can you give me some examples, or?
I can address that. I did speak to Ricky Rorich, the Renaissance Zone Coordinator, and what she said was anything that can be given an address, an address and have an assessed value for, can be eligible for a Renaissance Zone project. So say, for example, where Herberger's used to be, if that can be addressed and if the assessor can assign a value for that, then that could count as an individual project. Now, keep in mind by doing that if the mall said in the future, well, we want to do, like a facelift or a facelift of the entire mall, that would exclude that from happening. But we haven't heard that, mostly from talking to Ms. O'Brien. There's been a couple of spaces in the mall that have been looked at as potential projects. But as long as an address, according to the state, as long as an address can be given and the value can be assessed for that space, then it would qualify as a Renaissance Zone project.
So would that require any additional, like, zoning then, or additional work in order to get an address assigned and kind of break it out from the mall collectively?
I don't think it requires anything from the city. Some of those
I'm talking about the applicant.
from the applicant. I'm not certain about that. I believe right now that some of the stores in there, a mall is kind of like a condo. There's, each of those units is assigned separately, and they all pay in for maintenance. So I believe a number of those stores already have separate addresses.
Like suites, correct? Not necessarily for numbers.
I'm not sure that you would have to talk to the mall.
I would imagine.
About that.
I would imagine the street number's the same, but they're assigned A, B, C, D, or something like that.
unit numbers, yeah. Some sort of unit number.
Yeah, unit number. Yeah. Have you talked to the assessor? Is he able to actually break out, let's say they have a 1,500 square foot space in there, is he actually able to break that out of the whole into a value? So this could be taken, somebody could take advantage of this? Is that a possibility?
We can discuss that with him prior to this going to city commission. and
That
make
would be
certain
my,
of that.
it wouldn't pay for us to put this in there if it's not possible for him to actually break each space out individually. If he's giving them all a value as a whole, it's gonna be awfully difficult to break. And then, those spaces are all, you get one tenant in that needs a little more, they move a wall and, I'm not sure how that'd be something that we should talk to Assessor Hirschfield about, just to make sure that's even possible, because then if he can't do it, that would kind of make this mute, so.
I think, Mr. Chairman, that as long as you can define it, and very similar to Stephen's analogy to condo, as long as they can define some sort of a legal description or description for that interior space, then Mr. Hirschfeld could put a value on that number of square feet.
Yeah, that'd be
So,
my only comment, is
Yeah,
we can have him.
it might take a
have
little
some-
more effort. but
Yeah, if we can have some comments from him before city commission, I think that would be good to know before we approve this, so,
We certainly can do that.
thank you.
And, Mr. Chairman, before the finalization of this, with the the Renaissance zone on basically on Villard, are we again looking at the areas that the blocks that we have set aside? If people are not going to utilize those blocks, stretching it farther west and east, we have a whole property now that's going to be, we just condemned. It's going to be sitting empty. And do we need to extend east and west here if they're not using these blocks, or if they have no intention to ever use these blocks, that we separate those out on this map to give some possible opportunities for individuals that are, looking to redevelop. We have a huge empty lot sitting beside the Oasis. I don't know if this,
I think that's in the Renaissance.
it's in this
I
now?
think most of them
Yeah,
are
that's
covered,
all,
right?
yes. And if you're talking about where the
Okay.
hotel is gonna come
Right.
down, that
That's
was
covered?
added into
Okay.
the Renaissance Zone.
I just, give that opportunity because, that comes down. We have that empty lot beside Oasis. We just approved for the coffee shop, I guess, so
I
that,
think that's.
yeah.
Yeah, that whole area, it
Yeah, so that-
stretches all the way, to the,
I just want to
west.
make that we utilize the blocks. If there's blocks sitting there and there's somebody that has no intention of, ever doing anything, that we give other people opportunities up and down Millard or other parts of, like we're doing here with this island. So they have some opportunity to either develop it further or, at least make it look better. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity up north here for the mall and those 2 blocks. But I think there's a lot of opportunity too that's gonna happen on Villard. So,
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Decker, too, we have looked at East Villard is a little more challenging because the blocks with frontage and what's there, the payback for putting some of those short blocks in isn't the same. We've kind of put a value on that, and it's not quite the same as doing this large 2-block area. I think, West Villard, it's relatively new. I think we do need to do our advertising for this year and the utility billing, but we have been pretty successful in getting projects on West Villard. Has changed a lot. Is it where it needs to be? No, it's not. But it has changed a lot. There's a lot of interest in it. So I think that, the West Villard area, in my opinion, probably we should kind of just let it sit and try to filter out. The East Villard area is probably my bigger concern of how we then tackle that because of the short blocks and just the nature of what's developed there. So as you're driving around, you can kind of see it. It changes, and how the blocks are situated and whatnot. And by putting a short little half block in there, we have discussed as staff, it's much better to just put it in some of the larger areas and get a bigger impact. So yeah, if you have any feelings or questions or concerns on where the map is now, please let us know, because but we think we're trying to spread it out as far as we possibly can.
I mean, there's just property on East Florida that will probably never change. There's Colin's yard, probably never change. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Josephson, commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Josephson.
Thank you very much.
This would be another public hearing, so at this time, we will open a public hearing on the Renaissance Zone Development Amendment. If anybody has any comments or concerns, please come forward or call into 456-7006. Any comments or concerns regarding the Renaissance Zone Development Amendment? Hearing and seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed expansion of the city of Dickinson residential zone from 39 blocks to 41 blocks as being compliant with the City of Dickinson comprehensive plan and the City of Dickinson Renaissance Zone development plan, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also meeting the interests of the public health, safety, and welfare.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we will go to item 4 on our agenda this morning, public issues of concern not on the agenda. If there's anyone in the public or online that has any comments that they would like to discuss with us or concerns, please step forward or call into 456-7006. Any comments from the public? Seeing or hearing none, we will close that portion of our agenda and move on to item 5. Items not on the agenda. Commissioners, do you have anything that's not been on the agenda that you'd like to address this morning? This is your time. Hearing none, we will move on to the next item, which would be, item 1 would be P and Z member expansion. Is that supposed to be under that area, or is that supposed to be on the work session?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if Stephen's supposed to be on there, actually, but we're just gonna give you a brief update to let you know where everything is at. So last night, the City Commission approved the official expansion of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So the next meeting in June, we will have a fully staffed board. I believe Mr. Hadley has already been in discussions with the 2 new members that have been appointed. So we will welcome them in June, and we will be at max capacity for our Planning and Zoning Commission with the expansion.
I have to get some card tables and chairs.
Mr. Chairman, I've talked to staff, and I think we can put the additional commissioners here on the end. I think we go 3 wide in here. We'll be bumping elbows, but it'll work. So throw the 2 new commissioners out here on the end, and they're gonna set up the appropriate mics and everything,
Okay.
splitters, and get the chairs in here. So I've talked to staff about it. I think 7's about max up there. We go 9 up there, it'll be,
I mean, we could be touching armrests, I suppose.
yeah. So I think we can try to figure it out with 3 over here on the sides. I think we'll be okay.
All right, that sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yep,
could,
Mr. Hadley.
just want to welcome Mr. Johansson, one of the other members, is in the audience today. He came in and visited, and he volunteered to come in and see what he would be doing next month, so.
You got 10 minutes, give us a background. Sounds good. Then, if that's it on that portion, we will move on to the work session, which is a non-action item. Mr. Hadley, you just handed out a work plan. You wanna just give us a little background on this?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, since I started here, we kind of developed kind of a work plan on, this kind of gives you an idea of what planning staff is working on. And, you know, obviously, we have sort of a timetable and dates and times and who is working on it. A lot of stuff on here, you know, sometimes, not all of this stuff obviously is being dealt with today and this week or next week or whatever, but it's all stuff that is in our mill and in our wheelhouse with Stephen and myself. Really, it's not worth to go down every single one of these, but I wanted to kind of introduce it to you for this year. This is what we're working on, one of the main things we're working on. And then it gives a summary at the end of what we did and number of applications and all of that in 2021. Is we're working on the East Dickinson plan, very similar to those of you that were involved in the West Dickinson plan, but we're trying to do it within a 6 or 8 month period of time. We're trying to facilitate the Gooseneck property and then also just that area and make us think about that area, because in our existing comp plan and existing plan, we didn't spend a lot of time looking at that portion of our area. And it's a pretty important entrance and gateway into the city of Dickinson. So we're working with KLJ. It was a grant that I received to move forward and work on that plan. It is about to the point where we could, and we need to have engineering's comments on our transportation portion of it. And it's about to the point where we can bring it to this board for just kind of a first cut, first review. think it will provide some opportunities for the public, but it also gives us some direction. We have been working with the county in that, in discussions of some of the paving projects that they're doing. Our truck route that was planned in a different location, and the existing plan will now be kind of rerouted, and there will be a good connection for a truck route that actually makes sense on the east side of town, so.
Going to the south or?
North of US 10. Just would start out kind of just east of where Gooseneck is gonna go. And then merge over, excuse me, and Dean, you could, I don't know, Dean, you could probably jump in and say some of the paving efforts that you guys, I've been visiting with Neil a lot on that. Paving efforts that the county's doing, but it will connect up to the north connection on Highway 22, for the other truck route is kind of the goal that we're doing, so.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hadley, and Commissioner Franchuk, my understanding is you guys are going to pave, I don't know what the road is that's out by that subdivision on 10? 107th. You're continuing to pave that, right? To link up to 22, all the way around to 22. So then why are we talking about putting a truck route in right on the other side of Gooseneck?
That connection going north, because that's quite a ways to the east, but, so it's something that KLJ was looking at as far as realigning where we had a truck route planned.
Right.
That was in that same area. So that, they're kind of doing a spin-off of what was initially planned there versus what they're doing now. And we are, that'll all shake out on whether or not we put one there or whether or not we use that one that's further to the east. It might be a little further than we want, but it might work.
Well, what I'm thinking is where would your truck route by Gooseneck go? What would it connect to?
It would go north to 34th and then east to connect to where the county's paving.
So we're basically linking to what they're going to redevelop.
Right. Well, it's going to link to that, yes. That's the whole idea, is that we have some sort of connectivity between what their efforts are right now and getting folks from US 10 around the city of Dickinson up to Highway 22 north.
I know at one time too, there was discussion of going south, using that overpass that goes south to the old, past the briquetting plant, basically.
Lehigh Road or?
Lehigh Road, and connecting all the way out to 45th, I think it is, south, out by the airport. There was a plan. You remember that, Dean? Okay.
That's
I went out there and looked at this area and then also that area because there was discussion on that. That one is gonna be a very expensive and interesting endeavor to
Right.
do, so it might take a little more
That was
effort.
discussed at one time, bringing something south. That would come out basically by the airport.
south and.
There's a
south
lot
would
to
be
go
more
around.
important than another north one, in my opinion, but.
I'm just saying, we spend the effort and the money
Mhm.
to connect to something that they're already building.
Yeah, 'cause 117 comes out on 10, right? Or one- All right. Future discussion items. All right, anything else on Mr. Hadley's work plan or any other comments, Mr. Hadley?
Not really. I mean, you see most of the things that, you probably are familiar with a lot of the stuff that's going on in here. If there's any particular questions, you're welcome to reach out or we can discuss it further, as well. It's kind of a first cut. There's a lot of stuff on here and you can just kind of look at it, and if there's things that you'd like to add to the list, I'd say if you add something to the list, we need to take something off.
Sure, understand.
Blue Zone is a proposed community improvement plan, if you will, that we have the opportunity to do if we choose to move forward on it. They come in and do some studies and then do healthy living type recommendations. It's facilitated through the state of North Dakota. Yep.
All right. Any other questions, commissioners, for Mr. Hadley? If not, I think we've reached the end. I would look for a motion to adjourn. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.